I'm a wizard, mind you. This place is kept by powerful God.
What's up, my wizards? It's Dev here with Julie from Mtg down there. We like magic, and today I have got a pretty good little budget deck for you. It's only going to cost you about $35-40 on TCG Player, and it's a nice little straightforward beater. This is blue-green aggro. The Simic is a well-loved color combination, as evidenced by the fact that when I gave you the choice between Simic and a couple of other decks, like 75% of you said Simic. So I know a lot of you are looking forward to this one, and honestly, turns out pretty well. Of course, in this color combination, we don't have access to all the good removal like we would if we were red or black or red and black, but we do have a lot of like really good creatures and a lot of the better energy cards too. So let me show you what we've worked up here. There's 25 creatures in this aggro deck, and we'll start with the 4 copies of Greenbelt Rampager, are only 1 drop. Now, I know that playing a playset of Rampager is going to cost like 20% of the total budget of the deck, but in my eyes, it's very much worth it. This is a key piece right here. Not only is this oftentimes a 1-mana 3/4 on turn 3 or 4, you know, and by the way, playing this plus a 2-drop on turn 3, or maybe this plus a 3-drop on turn 4, that's very, very good right now. Being able to double spell, people call it, is really good when it comes to tempo on board, you know, which is probably the most important thing about this format right now. So not only is it a big creature that we can squeeze other spells on top of, and again, that's super important, but it's also 1 mana for an energy a lot of the time, which is important because it gives us energy for our hubs and our cubs and all the other energy-based stuff that we're trying to do. So really, really important piece, and I think that you've got to start with it. You could play Kessig Prowler or even Narnum Renegade or something if you wanted to save like $7, but I think it's very much worth it to play the card. We're going to play 4 Longtusk Cub in the deck, and it's actually one of the better creatures in the deck. This thing can get to 3 power extremely easily, and 4 power a little easier than you might think. This thing reaches 4 power a lot of games, and it's only 2 mana. We're looking for cheap, effective creatures, and Cub is the definition of that. This thing is only 10 or 15 cents right now, and it can get up to 5/5. Not unheard of at all. It's just a premium energy sink that if it comes down in the late game, we can just put a bunch of counters on all at one time. The card is awesome. Also in 2-drop news, we're going to play 4 copies of Aether Swooper in the deck, which isn't quite as impressive looking as Longtusk Cub, but it's still got a lot of stuff going for it. First of all, it flies, which we don't have a whole lot of in this deck, and I want to have at least a few flyers so we can get in. You know, that's important. And also, it can make creatures. This is also a good energy sink. You know, it can make us go a little bit wider on the board, and it's like a form of pseudo-vigilance. You know, you can swing in with your flyer and still have the same amount of creatures when you go to block the next turn, as long as you make a servo. So all of that's good. I think that that's definitely worth 2 mana to play a flyer that creates creatures for us. Into the 3 drops, we're going to play 4 copies of Rogue Refiner in the deck, and honestly, this card is one of the reasons I wanted to try and build this deck in the first place. I've just been really impressed with this card whenever I get a chance to play him. And this deck is no different. I mean, a 3-mana, 3-power guy is okay by itself, even if he can be shocked and stuff, you know. That kind of sucks, but 3-mana, 3-power is something you can't sneeze at, especially when it gives you a +1/+1 counter for Longtusk Cub, or gives you enough energy to play Greenbelt Rampager that same turn. That's good. It gives you enough energy to make a servo with your swooper. So all of that's just really good, and drawing you a card is probably the best part of the entire card. You know, we want to get some card advantage in this deck. We don't just want to run out of cards in our hand by turn 5 or 6, and Rogue Refiner goes a long way towards doing that, replacing itself and giving you energy and giving you a decent body, all for 3 mana. That's a really good rate. I'm going to play 4 copies of a slightly weird 3-drop here, but hear me out. I'm going to play 4 copies of Stitched Mangler in the deck because it kind of does an impression of Reflector Mage. And I know not all the way at all, not even close, but it's still, if you squint really hard, it's kind of like Reflector Mage for 10 cents and is not banned. So that's pretty cool. This also can keep creatures from crewing vehicles for a whole turn cycle. That's kind of cool. And obviously it's just tempo. You know, you want to smash through with your dudes, but we're facing off against a fair amount of aggro in this format right now. So with that in mind, play a Stitched Mangler or 2 and tap down some dudes so you can get in for some damage. To finish off the 3 drops, I'm going to play 2 copies of Empyreal Voyager here, and there are things you could play instead, namely Electrostatic Pummeler if you wanted to go that route. But I was just having a hard time getting Pummeler in, to be honest with you, and he's really susceptible to walking Ballista a lot of the time. So I just wasn't a huge fan of Pummeler when I tried him, but I do like Voyager. There's some good things about him. Now, a 3-mana 2/3 flyer may not look great in a format full of Heart of Kiorans, and to be honest, when it comes up against Heart of Kieran, it's not great. But wait till you see the sideboard. The sideboard is, we're just game planning against Heart of Kieran for, for game 2 and 3. But in any case, despite that, this still has good things about it. First of all, just the fact that it's another flyer in this deck is something I think is good. There's that. Take that off the box. But also, this has trample and we're playing pump spells. So there's times you can catch them by surprise and fly over for a bunch of damage. And by the way, we are playing Blossoming Defense in this deck, and just one Blossoming Defense can help Voyager take out a Heart of Kieran in combat and live to tell the tale. That's important. Now, I'm only going to play 2 copies of him because, again, he's not the most impressive thing in the world, but he is another flying body. That's not bad. He has trample for our pump spells. That's cool. He can take out a Heart of Kieran when you hit him with a pump spell, and he provides extra energy for us. There's just a lot of stuff the guy does, and I like the cut of his jib enough to include a couple of copies. To finish off the creatures, we're going to play Bristling Hydra in the deck, and this is maybe one of the best creatures, or cards, period, in the entire deck, honestly. Hexproof is just really, really good right now, and by the time we play Hydra, we'll usually have the energy laying around to give him a couple of counters, give him Hexproof a couple of times if we need to. So the card is just awesome. 4 mana for what can be a 5 or 6 power guy really easily is already a good rate. Plus, he's like, Fatal Push proof. He's Unlicensed Disintegration proof. Grasp of Darkness proof. There's just like all the best removal that everyone's playing right now. Can't hit this guy as long as you got a few energy open. So love this dude right now, and he'll straight up win you the game a lot of the times because a lot of decks can't really do much about it. Also, he's a Hydra, which is like one of my top 3 favorite creature types in Magic. So anytime I get a chance to play a good Hydra, I'll take it. We're gonna play a few vehicles in the deck here because vehicles are good, and especially when they're relatively cheap. It's always nice. We're going to play 2 copies of Fleetwheel Cruiser to start off the vehicles here. Fleetwheel is just really solid. I don't mind that it gives us a bunch of 4-drops. We're playing this and Hydra, because either one is very good to drop on turn 4, and we need some late game, And Fleetwheel's just great, This can turn a mediocre attack step on turn 4 into an awesome attack step on turn 4 that can sometimes come very close to ending the game even, Your opponent very rarely sees this thing coming. Just a 5-power haste is incredible, and it's not too hard to crew after that first turn either. So I like a lot about Fleetwheel right now, and I'm definitely going to play it, especially considering it's really, really cheap. It's less than 50 cents right now for a guy that you can cast with any color mana and just swing for 5 the turn you play him. Like, yes to all of the things on that, yes. I'm going to spend just $4 here to play 1 copy of Skysovereign Consul Flagship. $4 is very reasonable to play this, and I kind of want to play 2. To be honest with you, this is just a fantastic weapon against all the Mardu Vehicles decks in the format right now, and we really don't have a lot of weapons against them removal-wise, This just outclasses nearly everything that they play in the air. That's awesome, and it can kill a couple of guys really, really fast in that deck. They play a bunch of small dudes, so Skysovereign is just incredibly good against specifically that, but it's also good if you resolve it against control decks. It's good if you resolve it, or it's good against green-black counters even, just a huge guy in the air that can take out some of the smaller dudes that haven't gotten counters yet and stuff. So this thing has a lot of play against a bunch of decks, and we can definitely cast it. So I'm going to play at least the 1 copy. On to the spells here. We're going to play 4 copies of Attune with Aether to start things off, because this is a great spell. I already talked about this at length in the Mtg Aggro Deck Tech, but I want to touch on a couple of points here that I touched on in that video. Basically, this allows us to play far fewer lands, which is really, really important. We can put more actual cards in the deck, so that's good. This also is just a good turn 1 play for this deck that sets us up for, say, a turn 2 Greenbelt Rampager or something that stays in play. This also provides enough energy to do a lot of stuff. Longtusk Cub can get 1 counter if you play it on the next turn. Go ahead and have a 3/3 Longtusk Cub on turn 2. That's pretty good. This can also give you, enough energy to get a guy with Swooper. Just the fact that this is 1 mana to fix our mana and thin our deck, and we get to play fewer lands, and we get free energy out of it, that's just all the things the deck wants for just 1 mana, so it definitely gets a play set. We're going to play 4 copies of Blossoming Defense in this deck because it's one of the most important cards in the entire deck. We're in a format right now that is marked by a lot of aggro decks, like Mardu Vehicles is the big one, obviously, but it's also, Jund aggro. People are trying to make humans work in like 3 or 4 different ways. There's green-white tokens. So we're marked by a format that's very aggro-oriented, right, this second, and a format that still, even though it's aggro-oriented, still plays a lot of really good removal. Even the aggro decks will play a bunch of Fatal Push and a bunch of Shock and a bunch of Unlicensed Disintegration, and we suck against all those cards, so Blossoming Defense is really, really good. Now, the reason it's good against aggro decks is obviously as a combat trick. This can very often save creatures that your opponent didn't expect you to be able to save. So, and they'll end up playing around Blossoming Defense an awful lot of the time, which can help you out in a myriad of ways. So, love Blossoming Defense right now, and it's probably one of my favorite cards in the deck. It just needs to come down. It's like $1.35 for this uncommon. It's like, why are this and Harness Lightning so freaking expensive right now? So, despite the price, I think it's definitely worth the play set because it's one of the best cards in the format, sort of against, Push and Unlicensed Disintegration and Shock, which literally every deck is playing those cards. So Blossoming Defense is just really prime right now. And it's also worth noting that this can just be a creature buff on an unblocked guy. And yeah, you don't want to play it like that too often. A lot of people say if you play this as a buff on an unblocked creature, you're probably playing it wrong, but it all depends on the situation. Sometimes you can play this on an unblocked creature and it's basically a shock, 1 mana for 2 damage, and that can be really important when you're just trying to close the game out. I'm also going to play 2 copies of Highspire Infusion in the deck. I don't think it's super important to play a bunch of copies of this, not to mention that once your opponent sees 1 copy of it, they're going to assume that you're playing a 3 or 4 of, and they're going to start playing around it. So even just having the 2 copies can be psychologically important once our opponent sees 1 copy of it. But in any case, this is just a fantastic card in a lot of ways. 2 mana seems pretty steep for pump spells. But +3/+3 is really respectable. This will send through a creature for a bunch of damage if it's unblocked, and it'll virtually guarantee that most creatures survive whatever combat encounter they're in. Even like Aether Swooper, that's targeted by a Highspire Infusion, can take out a Heart of Kiora in combat and live to tell the tale. That's pretty important. But a lot of the times you're just punching through damage with this, and it's also worth noting that 2 energy is kind of a lot in this deck because it gives another counter to Longtusk Cub, gives another creature with Aether Swooper. There's just a lot of stuff that 2 energy can do for us. So Highspire Infusion is definitely worth a couple of copies. And I'll finish off the main deck here with something maybe slightly surprising. I'm going to play 2 copies of Unsubstantiate in the deck as our only real true removal. You know what I mean? This can both counter spells, sort of, which is important when dealing with things like Saheeli combo. You can throw them way off tempo and get a whole extra turn, which is really important against those decks if we just want to attack for the win, just that kind of tempo is very important. That kind of tempo is important against everything, On turn 2, you can say, return their snake to their hand that they're trying to play, and then you basically time walk to them, you get to go and get the initiative. You get to be proactive now. You get the first creature on the board, and they have to start responding, and their snake won't be as good on turn 3. So even that little bit of tempo can be really important sometimes, whether you're countering a spell or just getting a creature that's already on board out of the way so you can attack in. I think it's worth playing just a couple of copies of Unsubstantiate. I wouldn't go crazy or anything, but the tempo can be really, really good when we need it most. We're going to play 20 lands in this deck, which seems like a pretty low land count, but we've got Attune to Aether, so I'm not too worried about it. It hasn't presented that much of a problem thus far. And hey, Jund Energy Aggro plays 3 colors and some 5-drops, and it plays 20 lands, so I really don't think 20 lands is a problem in this deck. That's plenty. Obviously, you have the budget here. You could put in, like, Botanical Sanctums. You could even try Lumbering Falls, although I don't like lands that always come into play tap no matter what in an aggro deck. I'm not sure about that, but it would give you another hexproof creature. But bottom line here, I'm definitely going to play the Aether Hubs, even though they are a quarter of the budget for the playset. Still going to do it because we've got a lot of energy floating around here, and this basically just acts as a free mana of any color whenever we want it. Here's the sideboard right here, and like I said, we are gunning hard for Heart of Kiora in Game 2. We've got Ceremonious Rejection against it, and all the other vehicles, for that matter. And we've got Natural Obsolescence against it, too, and also against all the other vehicles as well. So we've got a lot of protection against vehicles in Game 2, because we are not great against all these other aggro decks that can really outvalue us with Heart of Kiora and stuff like that. So Rejection and Natural Obsolescence are perfect against those cards. And same thing with Negate. You know, this is really good against vehicles, but it also counters Planeswalkers, which we don't have a whole lot of options against otherwise. Dispel is in there as sort of 2 more copies of Blossoming Defense against all the removal in the format. Heroic Intervention is in there specifically against Fumigate in those Jeskai Saheeli decks because we have a very hard time coming back from a Fumigate. And I don't want to be caught flat-footed or on the back foot. We need to at least carry a couple copies on the board for if we see Fumigate. And then 1 copy of a weird card, just 1 copy of Kiora in the sideboard here. And I really would like to try this in the main deck because I like when it comes in. It usually comes in against control. But this does a few things in this deck. Let me go over this as though it were in the main deck real quick. I give it a full profile. Kiora is only 4 mana, which is relatively low, you know. This allows us to crew vehicles and then untap them. That's pretty cool. And at the same time, untap a land so that we can get a Blossoming Defense or a Dispel in after boards even. This allows us to have card advantage. That's really important in the later game in this deck to make sure we always have a creature to play. That's cool. And if we get the ultimate off, we get 3 8/8s. It's not that hard to get the ultimate off as long as we can protect her for a couple of turns. So Kiora could have made the main deck here. I just didn't find slots for her. And she will often come in against control. We'll take out things like Highspire Infusion and stuff. And here are your power rankings right here. Final score of 58, which is a pretty good tally for a $40 deck. And we're playing a lot of the better cards in the format right now. Like we get to play Greenbelt Rampager and Bristling Hydra. We get to play Blossoming Defense. Like those are all good cards. Rogue Refiner is super awesome, and Stitched Mangler is better than you think it is, I promise you. So try this thing out, man. It's a pretty straightforward Mtg Aggro deck, but can do a lot of work for you. And yeah, sometimes it has a hard time matching up with some of the other premier, you know, super expensive aggro decks in the format on game 1, but we shore up a little bit of that strategy in game 2 and can really have a fighting chance against some of those decks. But against control, we get a lot worse in game 2. Against the Healy combo, we get a little bit worse in game 2. So I feel like overall it sort of balances out, but we're a little bit worse game 2 against a lot of decks, except for aggro. We get way better game 2 against aggro, which is probably the biggest scourge in the format right now. We also have a hard time against the green-black counters decks because they will usually outclass us, especially if they're running things like the green-black Delirium deck. Ishkana is a really... We do not want to see Ishkana at all. but despite that, we can do some work against those decks as long as we get some flyers and some pump spells and stuff. We get some energy production going, and we can get Bristling Hydra all big, you know. So we definitely have outs against that green-black counters deck, but it is also kind of a bad matchup for us. But altogether, this is a straightforward, clean aggro deck that doesn't get too crazy on you or anything. It's not like as complex as the last deck I put up or anything. So try this thing out. Let me know how you feel about it. I feel like for 40 bucks, put together a pretty solid deck here. But for now, I'm tapped out. That's all I got for this one. Take to the sideboard down there and let me know how he felt about all of this, and make sure that you look in the description for not only the full deck list for this one, but also the Deck Tech playlist and my SoundCloud, because people keep asking me about my SoundCloud. So stay tuned for the next one. We're probably going to do Esper Aggro, although I've got a couple of other tricks up my sleeve. But Esper Aggro was the other deck that a lot of people wanted to see when I gave you the choice. So I may be coming to you with that one next time. We'll have to see, because I got a couple of things I want to push out to you. And we haven't been doing as many budget decks lately, which I feel like is sort of my bread and butter, and I miss budget decks. So I want to put a couple of those out in the coming week for you, too. So stay tuned. For now, if you enjoyed the content, you can like the content. That helps me an awful lot, like a crazy amount. You can also share the video if you think it deserves that. You can also sub if you're new and then hit the bell for the notifications and do all of the YouTube stuff. I'm Deb from SBMTG. This is Julie, who has been sleepy all video long. You were just the sleepiest baby. And we will see you guys next time. You're looking at me all cranky. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.